The Biden administration has come out against a bill that is going to be passed by Republicans in the House, and I think probably also passed by the Senate, which would essentially let it be known that men, that is biological men who decide to identify as women, have no space in women's athletics. That sounds like the most baseline normal aspect of competition. That's why we have men's and women's sports, not a unisex battle for competition. But the Biden administration has come out against it. And they actually had I thought, really interesting discussion about this on Bill Maher's show over the weekend. Let's play cut 30 here of Bill Maher going after the Biden administration over this woke ridiculousness. Listen.
I mean, wasn't that the point of Title IX? Title IX in the early 70s was something that was it was a major event in feminism, that we finally have this law that says at colleges, right, and I think high schools too, but definitely colleges, women's sports have to be given equal to men's sports, so that women aren't getting, and this led to the WNBA and lots of other stuff. This seems to be the opposite of that. It seems to be so many instances, I think, where wokeness is the opposite of what I grew up as liberalism. Liberalism was, let's give the women an equal shot. This is let's put a male in the swimming pool with the women. I don't get it.
So I actually think that the rewriting of a lot of what Title IX did is an interesting component of this too. Title IX effectively caused the end of men's collegiate wrestling in a lot of places, collegiate rowing, something I know a little bit about. They destroyed all these men's programs. It turns out that actually there's a greater interest in a greater number of sports for men to actually just compete and play in than there are for women. But Clay, as you know, because you have massive amounts of money going towards men's football and men's football is the big one, right? Some other sports, maybe basketball gets some money, some other things. But all it meant is that now you're going to spend all this money on women's teams that nobody goes to see, that nobody really cares about. You got to recruit for these women's teams that don't really do very much for the school. And you got rid of a whole lot of men's athletics as a result. I mean, crew teams in particular were a big casualty. This wrestling, you probably know there's some other sports too, where they were just cutting the men's programs to get more parity in the budget. So there was a destructive component even to Title IX that I think people don't really talk about. And I was familiar with this because of college rowing and what was going. Sometimes you'd row against a men's team, and they were like, it was like they had a bathtub and and two paddles they're trying to go by you. And then you row against our women would row against the women's team, and they had $30,000-$40,000 new shells, going down the river. I mean, Title IX.
This is why I've always thought, somebody floated this argument to me legally a while back, Buck.
Floated, Clay. I see what you did there.
Yeah, no pun intended. I thought this was brilliant. And the argument was, football isn't a men's sport. Women are open to making football teams and playing. They're just not good enough to ever make the team. And so football is actually a unisex sport. Men and women can both compete in it. 85 men just happen to get the scholarships as opposed to women. And I always thought, well, that's really kind of an interesting argument, right? Because there is no women's football team. So there's just a football team. But the result, for people out there who don't understand it, Title IX effectively mandated equal scholarships for men and women. And because football takes up 85 male scholarships, women, if you're a women's diver or a field hockey player, you might well get a scholarship. And the sport that really gets screwed on it, Buck, is baseball, because virtually no school in America gives full scholarships to baseball players, but every softball player would get a full scholarship, for instance, because they have to make up for the 85. And so I think the average male baseball team only gets like 8 scholarships for all of the players that are on the team.
I know scholarships are a big part of it. Is it only scholarships, though, or is it just the overall spend in the athletic program? I thought they needed parity in the spend.
Well, the parity in the spend comes primarily through scholarships, because football costs way more. But football makes money and effectively funds entire athletic departments at many schools. Every school loses money on virtually every sport other than football and basketball. And some schools even lose money on football.
A lot of my understanding, because I actually looked into this, there's a book called The Game of Life written by a guy out of Princeton where they looked at very few schools even make money all in on their football program. Very few relatively. I'm not talking about, Michigan and the big schools that you like, but like D3, D2 schools losing money on those football programs.
Wildly expensive. And also, to be fair, a lot of athletic programs are run to spend every dollar that they make. So you're a nonprofit. So most of them are either loss leaders or they're not trying to make money, right? If you were trying to make money, you would have a football and a men's basketball program, basically cancel out anything else. But I wanted to play this too, because I actually respect Piers Morgan here, because he says to Katie Porter.
Why hasn't he had you on his show? By the way, I'm seeing people doing the Piers show. What's going on, Clay? You guys are Fox News colleagues.
Yeah, I did get invited one time on Piers' show. I'd like to use a trip to London and write the whole thing off. If anybody from Piers Morgan's show is listening, I'd love to be on your show. I'll take a trip to London, write off the entire trip so that I can appear on the show one or two times.
Oh, you have been on the show, though. I didn't realize that. So I guess
I have not.
Oh, you have not?
I have
okay.
not. I've been invited, but I wasn't able to do it, and then they didn't reach out again. But Katie Porter may well be the next senator from California, and she is a left-wing zealot ideologue, not very likable person, appears to be an awful employer if you're a staff member of Congress. But Piers Morgan, she went after Riley Gaines, who we've had on this program a lot. Riley Gaines, former swimmer at Kentucky. She went after Riley Gaines and the arguments that she's making, and Piers Morgan actually pushed back and said, wait a minute, what do you disagree with that she's saying? And this was fantastic. Listen.
Including Riley Gaines, who I disagree with strongly, should be
What do you disagree with, out of interest?
I think that it should be up to sporting bodies to make the decisions about who and how
What has she said
compete.
that's actually wrong?
I think that what she has done is try to turn this. We talked about people, using things to kind of get likes and get clicks.
That's not what she's doing.
It's not?
I've got no truck for Riley Gaines personally, but all I've seen her do is stand up for women's rights to fairness and equality.
But
She actually competed against Leah Thomas, and it was obviously unfair. Leah Thomas won one of the races in the NCAA championships by 50 seconds against a bunch of biological females who simply couldn't keep up.
She can't even explain, Buck, what she disagrees with, but the orthodoxy requires her. I see this so often. I disagree with everything she's saying. Okay, what in particular? Well, you can't even explain it. That was so perceptive and well done, I thought, by Piers Morgan.
I do know some leftists, real leftists in the media, personally, and I've had more than one confide to me on this issue, and I will not call them out because I know them personally and they confided to me, but they know that this is crazy and they just don't want the trans activists to come after them. They have told me that. So that is the reality of being a Democrat today. You have to say things that everybody knows are completely insane, including the person saying it, because if you don't, the lunatic police will come after you.
And it's not even that. On top of it, Buck, ESPN, as part of their regular programming, said that Leah Thomas was one of the women of the year. So if your kid is just sitting down, eating breakfast, watching sports highlights, there was a 1 minute long advertisement talking about how heroic Leah Thomas was, a dude, for being a top women's athlete. This is on a sports network, which theoretically understands, sports fans should, the importance of, age restrictions, weight restrictions.
We need to do a parody. We need to get like a 240-pound bearded dude, like a Macho Man Randy Savage, who just claims that he's actually, 8 years old, and then he just goes onto the Pee Wee Football League, and it's just like stiff-arming little kids into the dirt. Like, yeah!
If you are listening to us right now and you wanted to create an incredible documentary, and you're a pretty good male athlete, it would just be, you're going to identify as a woman in women's athletic competitions all over the country. You could have a beard. You could be 6'4", ripped. Don't change anything other than maybe you decide to occasionally wear a dress, and just ridicule and mock this and see how many women's championships you could actually win. I think it would be incredibly powerful, both for comedy, satire, but also just an evisceration of the lies that you are required to believe if you are a left-wing Democrat acolyte right now.
So this reminds me, I think it's called a Sokol hoax. And this is when to test how crazy academia was. This academic, Alan Sokol, a physics professor at NYU, submitted a paper that was all gibberish to a highly accredited academic journal of physics. It was just jargon and gibberish, and it was called Transgressing the Boundaries Towards a Transformative Hermeneutics of Quantum Gravity. It means nothing. It was the whole thing was just jargon, and the point of it was just to show that this is all about conformity and virtue signaling, and they don't even read this stuff, they don't know. You kind of need to do a Sokol hoax. That's what you're really talking about, where a guy is just like, I'm a woman, and I'm just going to go in there, and I'm going to compete in what do you think would be the best event? What would be the best? I like doing it in tennis because they're not going to hurt anybody.
Oh, I mean, a great tennis player just smoking chicks, especially because you could wear a tennis skirt, you could dress to further. I think basketball, if you had a legitimately good men's college basketball player and he decided he was going to play in the WNBA, he would almost immediately become the greatest WNBA player ever.
There was a movie.
Juwanna Mann, 20 years ago, mocked and ridiculed the concept of this, but we could have a real-life Juwanna Mann, and you could have a player who was, if you're a college scholarship male basketball player, you would be the greatest player that's ever existed in the history of the WNBA. You could be dunking on these chicks like crazy. You could be trash-talking. How would the WNBA respond if a guy decides that he's identifying as a woman?
He'd score every time he got the ball.
He could play above the rim. Remember, Buck, you get to play with a smaller basketball, so you have a greater likelihood of making a shot because the ball is smaller associated with the rim. Nobody talks about this. The guy could hold the basketball like it was a softball, right? His hand would be so gargantuan. He would get 50 rebounds a game. He would get 20 dunks a game. Nobody could stop this dude.
I think the WNBA, it has to be WNBA.